Hey everyone, it's Alex, and welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week, the weekly series where we showcase the top 10 best decks in Marvel Snap. And if you'd like to support this content, hitting the like button is the best thing you can do. It's free and legitimately the only thing that YouTube cares about. With that being said, let's get started with deck number 1. And by deck number 1, I mean deck number 10. We go in reverse order. We use untapped base statistics, and we organize them by win rate, and we use the secondary characteristic of cube rate to determine the ranking order. Now, last week we had a Silver Surfer deck making a bit of a splash, and now this week we have this one here at number 10. Now at a 54% win rate, it's not particularly strong, but it is a very good cube rate at 0.38. I think that the cube rate is particularly strong because of this Silver Surfer based tech that includes the Darkhawk and the Mystique. Arishem continues to be a major component of the meta. Even with the release of Gwenpool and Hydra Bob, you are seeing a major kind of meta focus on Arishem. His decks continue to be very high performing, and we're going to be talking about a couple of them shortly. So a lot of these decks that happen to be like incorporating Darkhawks and Mystiques tend to do very well from a cube rate perspective, but their win rates are low because they completely throw matchups that aren't against Arishem. So as long as you can keep that in mind and snap and retreat appropriately, you should be pretty good, and that's why you see a really strong cube rate with a relatively low win rate on a deck like this. I imagine going forward, as Arishem kind of starts to settle a little bit, I imagine these I'm just going to play Darkhawk and random stuff style decks will start to wane in the meta. But until then, this hits number 10 on our ranked list. Now, going into our next list here, we got Ravonna Renslayer at number 9, a very strong cube rate at 0.41 and a 55% win rate. Once again, this does feature the Mystique and Darkhawk based play. Any combination like that is obviously very favorable against Arishem, who continues to be, I'm just repeating myself now. Arishem is a big part of the meta, but honestly, Thena, Angela, Kitty Pryde, they're still damn good here. You got the Mockingbird and Mysterio. Of course, you got the Hope Summers, lets you cheat that energy. But with Ravonna, you have multiple play lines here. If you're not against Arishem, you could, Ravonna into Iron Man Mystique, which is tremendously powerful. The one risk with this deck is that you really don't have activators for Darkhawk. So Darkhawk is very strictly designed to counter Arishem. If you're not against an Arishem based deck, you're likely not to be getting much out of Darkhawk, right? So you're gonna have to kind of use your other tools made available. So this is very much a Ravonna Renslayer deck with Darkhawk added in, considering what the meta considerations are. Regardless though, performing particularly well. This has been actually for the last few weeks a really high cube rate deck for that exact reason. Renslayer doing a lot of good work in the current meta. That takes us to number 8, and we have Loki at a 56% win rate and a 0.38 cube rate. Now there's a lot of different variations of Loki. Loki being played in Arishem again. I keep saying the name, but anyways, I liked this deck because it had some interesting tech choices, including the use of Juggernaut, which you don't see very often. Definitely a surprise play that a lot of people aren't expecting. And of course, you do have the Devil Dinosaur as a fallback with all this hand generation you have if you don't ultimately pull Loki. Again, the way the meta is, you have the splash of Darkhawk. Why? You know why. I've said it like 5 times. 5 times? I'm under exaggerating. I've said it like 15 times. Darkhawk, Arishem. The decks that are just having Darkhawk splashed in are doing better. It's legitimately a tech card against an entire archetype that we're seeing so very often. So even a deck like this, that you're like, hey Alex, I don't know why there's a Darkhawk in here. Well, it's because of Arishem's popularity. And once again, when that popularity wanes, a deck like this will no longer be in the top 10. We go to number 7 here, and we have Mr. Negative. Now, I'm not the biggest Mr. Negative fan. I'm not. But when you see a 0.55 cube rate and a 56% win rate, you got to pay attention. You just have to. And a lot of this is because, well, yeah, you get the Darkhawk Mystique combination. I wonder why. But you also have Rogue, which is great in the current meta, right? Because even the Arishem decks are running their own Darkhawks. You have high value plays like Wong Sage. You got the Lady Jane Foster to pull the value out of your deck. And you have the Ravonna, and Ravonna continues to be a very high-powered card with very synergistic plays that can reach very vertically with the Iron Men and the like, especially if you consider those inverted Iron Men, which obviously when it's inverted, it breaks the Ravonna synergy, but Ravonna gives you a backup plan if you don't draw negative. If you play Ravonna and you never draw negative, you still can do stuff. You can still Sage and Iron Man, and you can Mystique, and you can do all these things discounted, and even Taskmaster. So I really like the approach of this deck. You got the Ravonna side and you have the Mr. Negative side. Both have pop-off potential. So I really like how this is designed, very thoughtfully designed, and at a 55 cube rate, it cannot be ignored. Mr. Negative at number 7. That takes us to number 6. We have Thena Clog. We have a couple Clog decks that are starting to get a little popular, and I don't mind it, honestly. Anytime you have Debris, Cannonball, and Dr. Octopus, you start to get into this play pattern of, I'm just going to mess up everything they want to do. I want to take that board space away. Surprising is the non-inclusion of White Widow in this deck, but I mean, I feel like she's an add-on, probably even for Jeff for the most part. But ultimately, yeah, Thena Clog is doing a lot of work right now, 57%, 0.36 cube rate. It is pretty good. It's damn good. And it's good to see Dr. Octopus and Cannonball still performing statistically, because I was kind of concerned that Cannonball got completely destroyed and knocked out of the meta, and it kind of felt that way, especially with the change to Professor X, which we don't see in this deck, right? You don't see the Professor X style play here. But you are seeing Doc Ock and Cannonball still kind of strutting together in the meta. So ultimately, Thena Clog, you get that verticality from Thena, you get the disruption of the Green Goblin, the Debris, and etc., and you get that power output of Sage and the like. So really cool deck at number 6. That takes us into the top 5, and we have Silcock. Now this is a very new deck. I did note here only 210 games played on this particular deck, but it was very unique, and I thought, you know what, it's worth mentioning because it had a 58% win rate, which is very high, and a 0.32 cube rate, which is good. It's damn good. I liked it because you have the Black Bolt stature combination, the recently buffed Spider-Man Morales, and you just got good cards. You got good cards like Nocturne, White Widow, and I like the Black Widow splash in there as well. And of course, why not include Darkhawk? Because all the reasons why we've mentioned like a million times now. So it's doing really well. Silk's kind of interesting because it is 2/5 stats, and it's going to be on your side of the board. You don't necessarily control where it's going to go, but it's just stats on your side of the board. And it's interesting to see that we're not seeing a lot of Shang-Chi. It's being cut from a lot of decks. And that's crazy to me because I think Shang-Chi's winning a lot of games, especially with the amount of blob we're seeing because of Airsham. And ironically, Airsham decks are running Shang-Chi because you can kind of afford to play the tech. But anyways, this deck is performing really well. Very low games played, so the statistics like next week might vary wildly. But ultimately, I wanted to showcase it to you because we like to showcase some fun new stuff whenever possible, especially when it's performing exceptionally well as this deck is. That takes us into number 4, and we have Rez Airsham. Now, this is named after Rez Snapper, who I believe was the originator of this particular deck. Anytime I see Uatu and Umbaku, I get really excited. Cozy and I even joked about Umbaku and Uatu in the Snapchat episode where we discussed Airsham, and I didn't have the Cocoa Schnutz to actually put in a deck. And here we are at a 58% win rate in a 0.36 cube rate. It's performing very well. And I mean, listen, you got the hand generation of Coulson and Nick Fury with the Loki play. You have the Airsham, you have the Blob, of course. And Fastos makes this deck, which is kind of interesting. If you don't have Fastos, a very easy replacement is Mystique here, because you Mystique your Blob type thing. Anyways, this deck is performing. You can't take it away from it. Last week was a special mention because it didn't have a very large sample size of games, and now it actually does, and it's still performing very well. So the deck is worth checking out if you're interested in playing Airsham. Even though we do have a higher performing Airsham deck, that one does not have Umbaku and Uatu. So just throwing it out there, if you like Chuatu here, then you're going to have to do it with Rez Airsham. And that takes us to our top 3. But before we get into our top 3, a reminder, if you're not subscribed yet, consider hitting the subscribe button. Over half of you watching right now, listening to my words being spoken, are not subscribed. And I just ask you to consider it. That's all. Just maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. It means a lot to me. And, I love you guys. And I really appreciate all your support for my content. As most certainly the support for Gilgamesh has been appreciated from Second Dinner side, because Gilgamesh has been a mainstay in the meta since getting buffed. And what's interesting is that you got the Gilgamesh 2-point buff, you got the Shauna 2-point buff, and with the two of them, they have consistently made Zoo better. And we knew Mockingbird was going to do that anyway, but a 59% win rate, Zoo's crushing it. And that's kind of why we're seeing these different alternate versions of Silver Surfer making it into these decks, or these top 10s, because you're often seeing like Killmongers and all these tech components that do a good job of answering the current meta based on what's happening. And this has a very high meta share. Zoo's good. And the thing is, though, is now they're teching in Coccia to protect those 1-drops from being wiped out completely. So ultimately, we've seen some changes through the last couple weeks. Like Nebula wasn't in the past couple weeks, right? Coccia wasn't in the last couple of weeks. Shadow King continues to be absolutely remarkable. If you're like, I keep losing to Erisham, Shadow King their blob. You know what I mean? And their blob's like just dead. Like, it's completely useless. So I really like what this deck's doing. 59% win rate, 0.33 cube rate. It just has so many different ways to win. You can win with the tech of the Shadow King. You can win with the power of the Gilgamesh. It's just good. And of course, you have Mobius on Mobius, which crushes the Loki gameplay you're seeing a lot. That's popular in both Erisham and in standard Loki. So this deck kind of has it all. I really like it a lot. Zoo is the deck to play. And also, if you are trying to get the Hydra Bob missions done, just like add Hydra Bob to this somewhere. Like if you don't have Coccia, just add a Hydra Bob and try to get the weekend mission done. That takes us to number 2. And it's Clog. Now, once again, only at 200 games played, but I wanted to feature because the statistics were strong at 59% win rate and a 0.39 cube rate. Now, what makes this version quite interesting is that, like, as we mentioned prior on the other Clog list that was using Thena, this one's using White Widow for that additional Clog component. It's also using the tech of Shang-Chi, which is being cut from so many decks right now. I feel like decks are getting a little greedy, and as a result, we get better stats. Like, we include a very high value, if not one of the absolute best 2-drops in the game in White Widow. We include Shang-Chi, and suddenly we're able to kind of flip those statistics to make them even stronger. I like the Daredevil edition as well. I think that's very spicy. I would actually tend to cut Daredevil in these particular decks. The reason why Daredevil is very strong here is because if you're playing against Erisham, for instance, and on turn 5 they play their blob, you're able to reactively Shang-Chi it early, which I think is kind of interesting and not often thought about because those Erisham decks are playing in advance a turn because they're extra energy. Keep in mind, 200 games played, so a lot can change, but Clog actually making a pretty big impact on the current meta from a statistics standpoint anyways. Whether or not that remains over the weeks to come, only one way to find out, and that's to, well, come back next week. As we move to our number 1 deck, our top deck of the week, and it's Erisham. It is Erisham. Tech Erisham, 59% win rate and a 0.42 cube rate. Erisham is absolutely crushing, and listen, these are all the best cards for Erisham right now. I mean, Legion is absolutely incredible. Blob is incredible. Interesting that this version does not run Mystique. It also does not run Darkhawk. What you've got here is Loki, Enchantress. You got the Shang-Chi. And I mean, it's all about, hey, they're going to be playing Darkhawk. Everyone's playing Darkhawk against you. Why not Rogue it? Why not Enchantress it? Why not Shang-Chi it? It also runs Gwenpool in the list. And so if you're looking to get the Gwenpool season kind of weekend mission done, which I think is like 500 gold, it's like some crazy amount of gold. Here it is. Here's the deck. You got Gwenpool. I mean, listen, you're probably not even going to see Gwenpool half the time, and you're just going to win games because Erisham's damn good. But anyways, this is the number 1 deck of the week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I genuinely appreciate every single one of you, and we'll see you on that next Marvel Snap video.